So now we get to flip it a little bit, and I get to introduce Dave Rendall. So you've been seeing a lot of him today already, but for those of you that don't know, he is, what's a good way to describe it? I think I called him last time the classic overachiever you hate or love or something like that. So, man, the guy's done everything, literally. I mean, he runs Ironmans. He's got multiple degrees. Like I said, he's done everything. He even just launched a podcast called The Imperfectionist, and in the first few weeks, he's got millions of downloads. So this is a popular guy, and for a really good reason. You'll see. Over the last 20 years, he's talked to clients or audiences all over the world, including the U.S. Air Force, the Australian government, Fortune 50 companies like Microsoft, AT&T. He was a professor, stand-up comedian. As he mentioned, he's worked at nonprofits. Like I said, he's done it all. And I asked him, I was like, where's the weirdest place that you've spoken? I was kind of curious, taking cues off of his questions. He said he actually did a speech in Kathmandu, Nepal. And I was like, well, what's the oddest audience that you've talked to? He said he did a speech for a marijuana producer that was very, very interesting. So he's just a heck of a guy. I've grown to know him as a friend. He lives nearby over in Raleigh, I believe, or close enough. He's over in that area, and he's written several books that I would also recommend taking a look at. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dave to the stage, and you guys enjoy. You're in for a treat.
But I'm a creep. The marijuana company was a marijuana store, a series of stores in Washington State, so it was legal. I wasn't down in Columbia or something. I got there, and it was all of their employees. And if you have a picture in your mind of who you think works at a marijuana store, you're exactly right. We got to lunchtime, and I was like, hey, we were just talking, and I said, hey, I'm guessing some of you, were smoking weed before it was legal, and they're like, we did, some of us started when we were 8. I was like, holy cow, okay. So they were really getting after it, and this has never happened to me before or since at an event. The event got over at like 3:30. And then there was a break, and then we were going to get together for wings and bowling, right? And then, so we get done, and I was like, I don't know what the instructions are for what's next. I know we're going bowling later, but there's some time in between. And this one girl just from the back goes, who wants to come to my house and get high? And everybody was like, woo, and they all left to get high. And normally that's what gets you fired. There, it was like, good job. Stay focused on the mission, Keep people high, stay high, So those people tore up some food at the bowling because they'd been smoking weed for the last 2 hours. And they're like, I'm ready for anything you got. I also don't think bowling is the time to eat stuff. Your fingers are deep in those holes that cannot be cleaned. And then you're just like, let me grab food that requires both hands and fingers and licking and stuff. Not for me, not for me. All right, so let's get hot. No, okay, so... first thing people want to know when they meet me is how tall are you? The answer to that is I'm 6'6", but I'm 6'9" in heels. And one of the problems with growing up tall and growing up poor, I grew up in a trailer park in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. When you grow up tall and you grow up poor, you grow up faster than your family's ability to get you pants. So I always had high water pants or floods. They never made it down to the floor, and the kids at school would tease me and hurt my feelings, and my mom knew they were teasing me, hurting my feelings. She wanted me to feel better. She told me they were capri pants, and they were coming back in style. That turned out not to be true. I'm 6'6". My wife of 29 years is just 5'3". That's hard to imagine. Sometimes people are like, how does that work, Dave? You're so tall, she's so small. And what I tell people is that in our relationship, deodorant is much more important than breath mints. So that takes some people a little longer. It kind of works its way through. Some people get that later. Some people haven't gotten it yet. Just tell your neighbor if they haven't sorted it out. Sometimes people come for the selfie later, and they're like, I get it now because they're right down there in that deodorant zone. So my wife and I, we've been married for 29 years. We have 3 daughters. They're 22, 20, and 17. Those are weird names, but we really like them. And one of the things about living in a house with all women is they're gradually trying to turn me into a woman, right? They never just come right out and say it, but they're always inviting me subtly or not so subtly to do things their way. And I remember the first time it happened, I asked my wife if we had any extra soap because the shower was all out of soap, and she said, no, we don't, but here's a loofah sponge and some body wash. And at that point, I had a decision to make. Was I going to be a man or was I going to be clean, right? And when I chose to be clean, my journey to womanhood began, right? Because it wasn't just any body wash, it was exfoliating body wash. And it wasn't just any exfoliating body wash, it was from Bath and Body Works. It was called Warm Vanilla Sugar, right? And I grew up in a religious family, and I knew that it was wrong to be in the shower all by myself getting some sugar, but it felt so right, And then I found out about things that women do that I didn't know anybody did. My wife came home from getting her hair done one time, and she said, do you notice anything different about me? Now, I don't know if you live with anybody that likes to test you, right? She said, do you notice anything different about me? And I did, because I'm a noticer, and I'm like, you got your hair cut and you got it colored, and it looks lovely. And I thought I passed the test, but then she asked me the question that all men dread, which is, what else? And I didn't know, so I said what I say when I don't know, which is, I love you. And that didn't work, so I kept guessing. I kept getting it wrong. Finally, she told me she'd gotten her eyebrows done. Now, like Mike told you, I have multiple degrees, and at that point, I had a master's degree, and I was 30 years old, and I thought I was aware of what went on in the world, and I had no idea what she was talking about. I said, what do you mean you got your eyebrows done? She said, they were getting out of control. I said, that sounds serious. How does an eyebrow misbehave? She said, I said, I don't know. I've had these bad boys for 30 years, and they've never given me any trouble, and they never had given me trouble till my wife told me your eyebrows could give you trouble, and from that day on, it was like I had 2 wild animals fighting on my forehead every single day. So I decided if they were going to try to turn me into a woman, I was going to fight back and turn them into men, and I had a success. Years ago, I was sitting on the couch with my daughter, Emma, and she's the middle one in our family, and I was the middle one in my family. She's athletic, I'm athletic. She's snuggly, I'm snuggly. We got a special connection. In fact, Sunday, I'm going to go down to Wilmington, which is where she lives after graduating from school down there, and we're going to we call it football Sundays, because she's the only one that likes football, and I drive down there and we watch the Green Bay Packers lose lately, but we watch it. They don't lose as much as the Panthers, though, do they? Boy, they don't even know. Hey, I cheer for the Panthers, too, unless they go head-to-head. I cheer for the Panthers. I've paid to go there. Now you can get it free with a Bojangles meal. You get fries, a drink, and a ticket, and then you're like, I don't even want the ticket. You're like, you can get free parking, though. So she's on the other side of the couch, and she's on her iPad, and I'm watching some TV, and she puts down her iPad, and she comes over, and she sits on my lap. I'm like, this is beautiful. A little snuggle time with my daughter, watching some television. But after 2 seconds, she's off my lap, and she's not even next to me. She's all the way on the other side of the couch, back on her iPad, and I was bummed, I was like, hey, what's going on? I thought we were going to have some snuggle time. And she looks up from her iPad and she goes, I farted on you. And that's when I knew I was making a difference, right? That's when I knew that my life mattered. That's leadership is what that is. So all of those stories were about me being different in ways that I cannot control. I didn't choose to be tall. I didn't choose to be poor. I didn't choose to be the only man at my house. I was different in ways that I couldn't choose. But as you can see from looking at me now, I'm deliberately different in ways that I can and that I do choose. And I want to talk to you about thinking differently about 2 things today. When we think about how to get better and how to help other people get better, I want to give you a different way to get better and to help other people get better. And the first part of that is this idea of awakening to see that everything we've learned about weaknesses is wrong. So when I was a kid and I was in school, I was a troublemaker. Do we have any former troublemakers or maybe current troublemakers in the room? 3 people. Okay, well, I guess this is just a room for good people. So I was a troublemaker, and I was always in trouble with the teachers for 3 things. I wouldn't sit still, be quiet, or do what I was told. Teachers didn't like me very much. They called me obnoxious, rebellious, inappropriate, immature, told me I had no self-discipline and no self-control. And if I couldn't fix those things, I was going to end up homeless and living in a van down by the river, right? That was in 1984. Spoiler alert, in 2024, if you live in a van down by the river, you are killing it, #van life, right? Everybody's jealous. Everybody's jealous. If you're in a van down by the river, how did you do it? And did you upgrade a Sprinter? And how much bedroom do you have in there? And how long can you go? And is there a shower? Or do you do that? You stop at hotels? So teachers gave up on me and they'd send me to the principal's office. The principal, I got sent to the principal's office in 3rd grade, so I was 8 years old. He sat me down on his lap, which seems questionable now looking back on it. And I never realized how important that laugh was until I was doing a presentation in Oklahoma, true story, and I got to that part and nobody laughed. And I'm like, I don't feel safe right now. I don't feel like we share the same values. You know, I left very quickly after that presentation was over. I was very uncomfortable with those folks. He sat me down in his lap and he told me a story about 3 kinds of bad people. He said there's bad people, there's really bad people, and there's people who are too far gone to ever be good people again. I was 8, right? And he told me I was a bad person on the verge of being too far gone if I couldn't learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. Now, let's talk about intentions for a second, because I think he was trying to help me. He was teaching me what his parents, his teachers, and his employers had taught him about success, which is find and fix your weaknesses. And he had found mine. He had told me about them, and he wanted me to get busy fixing them, because if I couldn't fix them, he was worried I would never be successful. I think he had the right intentions, but as I want to show you today, he had the wrong framework. Now, I'm not the only one who had trouble in school. Ken Robinson says many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not, because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. Many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not because the thing they were good at, their strength, wasn't valued, it was ignored or denied, or it was actually stigmatized. We're telling people at school that the best thing about them is the worst thing about them. Now, this doesn't just happen at school, it happens at home. At home, my parents called me motor mouth, right? In a well-intentioned effort to fix my weaknesses. Their belief was that I talked too much and too often, and about things that I shouldn't talk about, and they were worried that I wouldn't be successful if I couldn't find and fix my weaknesses. And so every day they reminded me, I think they loved me, right intentions, but wrong framework. They spent every day fearing that if I couldn't learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told, I was never going to be a successful person, right? Many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not because the thing they were good at, their strength, wasn't valued, it was ignored or denied, or it was actually stigmatized. We tell people, well-intentioned, we tell people that the best thing about them is the worst thing about them, and we wonder why people aren't getting better. And I realized this process is exactly what happened to me, because as an adult, I became a professional speaker. And as a professional speaker, I get paid for 3 things. I get paid to stand up and not to sit down. I get paid to talk and not to be quiet. And I get paid to run my own business and not to do what other people tell me to do. It turned out that every one of my weaknesses was also a strength. And every one of the worst things about me were connected to the best things about me, except nobody saw that because they were so busy trying to fix the weakness, they never saw the strength. So 2 things I'm not saying today. I'm not saying that people don't have weaknesses. If you live with anybody, you know that people have weaknesses, okay? What I'm also not saying is you need to turn your weaknesses into strengths. That's what everybody was trying to do. Get good at sitting still. Get good at being quiet. Get good at doing what you're told. I didn't fix any of those weaknesses. I discovered those were weaknesses, but they were also strengths simultaneously. Does that make sense? You don't have to turn the weakness into a strength because it already is, right? So, the idea for today is really simple, that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. Now, that can seem like a bold claim that every weakness has a corresponding strength, so we're going to do a little activity so you can see how easy this is to do and how you've already learned this just from hearing me say it. So I'm going to tell you a story about my youngest daughter, and it's going to be a negative story. It's going to be a weaknesses story. So I'm only going to tell you her weaknesses, and when I'm done, you're going to raise your hand and tell me her strengths. Does that make sense? Okay, so raise your hand if you have kids. Raise your hand if you ever were a kid. Okay, so we got everybody. You don't want to leave people out when you're speaking. That's a pro tip there. Raise your hand if you have at least one difficult kid. Okay, hold on. Keep them up. If you have a kid who's so difficult, if you would have had them first, you wouldn't have even had more kids. You know what I'm talking about? That's when you saw some extension from some folks, right? Some people doubled it up, right? And so I'm about to tell you about my 3rd daughter. And how many daughters do I have? 3, right? Like we had her, we're like, we're not good at this anymore, right? It's irresponsible for us to continue producing children at this low level of quality and putting them out into an unsuspecting world that isn't prepared to handle what we've done, right? And so Sophia is our youngest, and Sophia's difficult. I don't know if any of you have a difficult kid, but she's difficult. What does that mean? When she was 4 years old, she looked my wife and I in the eye, and she said, I hate you, and I wish I had another family, right? Remember, listen for the strengths, right? And I'm like, whoa, I don't know how to handle that. I was like, well, I guess, we appreciate you being open about your feelings. And in the spirit of transparency, we should let you know we've been feeling the same way about you. We didn't know that we could say that out loud. We thought you had to push that down and drown it in alcohol, but I guess we're just talking about stuff. And we're trying to actually find you another family before the trade deadline because we'd love to get you off the roster if we could, We're even willing to give up future draft picks, if we can just... We'll take the loss on the contract and everything, So she's difficult, and one of the things that makes her difficult, she's a liar, right? And so I'm going to tell you about the favorite lie she ever told. If you wonder, oh, she's a liar. When I tell you it's my favorite lie she told, that means there's a rank order list, and I'm telling you the favorite, that's how you know someone's a liar, right? So she's in kindergarten, first day of kindergarten. Teacher says bring a snack and a lunch. Sophia brings a snack and a lunch, and her snack is a bottle of water and some Ritz crackers in a Ziploc bag. Snack time rolls around. She gets out her snack. Teacher looks, sees some people have snacks, some people don't have snacks. When the kids don't have snacks, and don't worry, she went to this cute little religious school in Goldsboro. Anybody there had money for snacks. Nobody was struggling financially. That's not what happened. Just they forgot, their parents forgot, first day of school, So the teacher isn't judgmental about it. The teacher just goes and she's prepared and she gives out cookies and juice to all the kids without snacks. Now, I don't know if you remember what it's like to be 5, but cookies and juice is the thing, right? Cookies and juice is the thing. And that's a sugar drink with a sugar treat. That's beautiful. You want both of those in there. And so Sophia saw this and she was not pleased. Right? Remember, listen for the strength. So Sophia raises her hand first day of school. She's like, this is some bull crap right here. I'm over here with crackers and water, basically prison rations, and these delinquents over here are getting cookies and juice, And so she raises her hand, and the teacher calls on her, and so she says, Sophia, what can I do for you? And Sophia says, well, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you earlier, I'm actually allergic to water, okay? Sophia sold all her credibility on day 1 of school for some cookies and some juice, okay? So Sophia's difficult, and Sophia's a liar. Raise your hand if you heard a strength while I was very busy telling you about weaknesses. Okay, right there in the middle. Go ahead. She was resourceful. Nice. Over here. She's a storyteller. That's exactly right. Go ahead, right there. She was assertive. Yeah, some kids won't answer a question from the teacher even late in the year. She called on the teacher. She's like, excuse me, no, this is our time now. I'm the captain now, right? Like she was ready to go. Okay, any other strengths? Go ahead, right there. Yeah, bold, right? Bold, yeah, go ahead. Intelligent. Yeah, she'd never heard about allergies. We didn't have them at our house. We don't have anybody allergic to any foods, right? So she learned you can't be forced to eat that to which you are allergic, right? So she's like, water's out for me, Somebody had their hand up over here. Go ahead. She's a problem solver. I love it. Go ahead over here. She's a clear communicator. Yeah. All right. I love it. So now, if any of you are interested in taking Sophia on, she's almost an adult, but we're still looking, right? We're still looking. If you're interested, she drives and everything. But look what just happened. You very accurately, very quickly, and very positively described my daughter when I described her to you very negatively. Does that make sense? And I know you described her accurately because she's my daughter. All I did was suggest that maybe weaknesses are strengths, and then some of you think I'm such a bad father by the way I described her. But yet, look at how many different strengths people picked up from one story about weaknesses. You see where I'm coming from? And this will absolutely transform every relationship you have. If you look at your coworkers and you see strengths where you also see weaknesses, if you look at your spouse or your partner and you start seeing strengths where you also see weaknesses, if you look at your kids, because do you think it changes my relationship with my very difficult and oftentimes very dishonest daughter that I know that her weakness is also a strength? Do you think that changes, right? And by the way, don't misunderstand Sophia. Some of you are like, you shouldn't talk about your daughter on stage that way. If you understood anything about Sophia, you know that she loves it. She's like, did you tell the water story? Ha, that's the best. I'm a liar. I'm a lunatic, right? She's a sociopath, right? Like, she's out of control, okay? All right, so what do we do with this information, right? So we know that weaknesses are also strengths, so let's look at that connection. So one of the things about being tall, I fly a lot because I travel all over the world. By the way, for the older folks in the room, I'm 50, and that counts. If you were born in the 1900s, you might know this song. You know that song by Bob Seger, Going to Kathmandu? You heard that song? So I played that landing in Kathmandu. That was fun. I was like a little kid, heard Kathmandu, but when you live in the trailer park, you don't think you're going to Kathmandu. You know what I mean? So I got to fly a lot. When you fly a lot and you're tall, it doesn't work real good, right? So every time I go to get on the flight attendant sees me. She says, "Sir, you need to watch your head," which is hard to do if you've ever tried. And I get on the plane like this. And you're like, whatever, Dave, we've ducked before. And you have, but you're used to re-emerging on the other side. I don't get to re-emerge. I just shuffle like a hobbit to my seat, you know? But I fly a lot, so I get that economy comfort seat, maybe. I get that exit row seat. I get that sweet, sweet first class upgrade. I'm okay once I sit down. But sooner or later, I've got to go to the bathroom, right? And if you don't fit in the middle of the plane, you sure don't fit on the side of the plane where they put this bathroom. And some people have accused me of exaggerating this next part, which is why I've taken the liberty of an airplane bathroom selfie. So this is me in an actual airplane bathroom. That's my shoulder on the ceiling of the airplane bathroom. It's not even the top of my shoulder on the ceiling of the airplane bathroom. It's the side of my shoulder on the ceiling of the airplane bathroom. So I get in the airplane bathroom. I close the door behind me. I don't know if it's locked because I can't turn around to check it. And so now I'm here, but the toilet's over there, and I have things that need to go in the toilet. So I try to get closer, but the ceiling goes like this, right? So as I try to move closer, it just pushes my face closer and closer and closer to the toilet, and that's not what I'm looking for, and that's why I've invented something I call the limbo yoga approach. And what I do is I press my face into the ceiling, and then I try to form my upper body to match that shape of the side of the airplane. We just get it in there, which allows me to get my lower body in and rotate, right? Now, the problem is not a lot of visual information now about what's about to happen here. But I'm a problem solver. They always got mirrors in those bathrooms. So I'm thinking if I can get a look in that mirror and we can kind of do some triangulation. This is some science some of you might not understand, but we're triangulating here. And then when I'm looking in that mirror, though, I realize that mirror is right over the top of the sink. And I'm realizing that's perfect. That's a whole lot higher and a whole lot closer. That seems custom designed for what needs to happen here. That's a tall man's urinal is what that is. That's fantastic. Now, some of you are disgusted and will never fly again, and you're online looking for an RV right now. And you shouldn't be, because if you feel that way, you misunderstood me the same way a guy in South Carolina misunderstood me. And by the way, I'm not making fun of Oklahoma or South Carolina. These are where those things happen. This isn't one of those, like, let me make fun of a place. But we are North Carolina, which is literally above South Carolina, so we are better than them. But this guy came up to me, and he came up to me, and he goes, "I know what you mean, Dave." He goes, "I'm a big guy." He goes, "I don't even try for the toilet anymore in those airplane bathrooms. I just go right in the sink every time." I was like, "Oh, that's because you're disgusting." I said, "You got confused. That was a true story." And I turned it into a funny story. I don't go in the sink. I'm not an animal. I go all over the wall like a normal person does because I'm classy, right? Because I'm classy. Now, why do I tell that story? Because being tall is a big frustration. We talked about the capri pants. We talked about the airplane. But it's also a huge advantage. Tall people get paid more than small people get paid for the very same work. It's not right, but it happens. It's also not tall people's fault. We're not paying each other more. Small people pay tall people more for the same work. So this is in your hands, right? You can do something about this. This is within your control. This is in your hands, you know, your tiny, tiny little hands. And part of the reason we pay tall people more is because we think they're smarter. They do these tests at universities, and as people get taller, just people guess that as people get taller, they get smarter, and they don't, but somehow we just get this vibe, and so people think that they're smarter. And so then we vote for taller people in elections. Taller people are way more likely than smaller people to win elections. You can Google even U.S. presidential elections, and you see a consistent pattern where it's not every single time, but it's way more than by random chance. So it's good to be tall until it's not good to be tall, right? And that's what every characteristic you can potentially have is like. Every characteristic that you could have is a strength and a weakness at the same time. And the reason I bring that up with height is because I've talked to smaller people, and I'm married to a smaller person. And they tend to think that it's all good to be tall and all bad to be small. This 5-foot-tall lady came up to me after a presentation once, and she said, that was really helpful. She said, I never thought about how comfortable I was on the airplane and how uncomfortable you must be. She said, I thought all the advantages were for being tall and all the disadvantages were being small. And now you helped me see that I have a different comfort level in a lot of situations than you do, and there's a lot of advantages to being small that I didn't see before because I wasn't looking for it. Does that make sense? Every characteristic is a strength and a weakness at the same time. And a good way to think about this is like side effects. There's no such thing as a medicine without side effects. If you want the benefits that a medicine provides, you have to be willing to accept the side effects. And what I'm telling you today is that every person is like that. If you want the benefits that any person will provide to your organization, to your life, your family, you have to be willing to accept the side effects because there's no such thing as a perfect person. Every person has side effects. Peter Drucker said it this way. He said, strong people always have strong weaknesses too. Where there are peaks, there are valleys. If you want to work with strong people, if you want to live with strong people, if you want to have relationships with strong people, they will always have strong weaknesses too, because where there are peaks, there are valleys. Now, but you wouldn't be at something like this if you weren't trying to get better and you're like, I don't know, Dave, I just want to fix it. So let's watch what happens when you don't accept it and you try to fix it. Let's go to Walmart. We don't actually want to go to Walmart, but like figuratively, we're going to go to Walmart. Walmart's biggest strength is low prices, right? They're cheap. Does Walmart have any weaknesses? We have other things to do today, so we're going to summarize. Poor service, poor quality, poor design. Okay? So let's just fix service. Let's just fix one of their weaknesses. Let's hire more people. Let's train them better. Let's pay them better. Let's give them better benefits. What just happened to the costs at Walmart? They went up. What just happened to the only strength that Walmart has? It went down. We broke them when we tried to fix them because we wouldn't accept the connection between strength and weakness. Does that make sense? Now, this isn't the only example because there's also a place called Target. Ladies, what do we call Target? Target, right? A self-respecting woman will walk up to you and be like, I got it at Target, right? No woman in the history of humankind has ever walked up to another woman and been like, I got it at Walmart. Check it out. No one's ever done that, right? Yeah, you better laugh because I almost tore my ACL doing that. I went for that with you. I appreciate it. I don't know how much farther than 50 I can keep doing that move, right? So Target, why do we call it Target? Better service, better quality, better design. So why doesn't everybody shop at Target? Because you have to pay more than at Walmart. So their weakness is they don't have the lowest prices. So let's lower the prices at Target. What's going to happen? We're going to sacrifice service, quality, design, and stop being Target and go back to being Target. And if you don't believe me, there's a company that tried to do both, and it's called Kmart. They didn't have the lowest prices, but they didn't have the best experience. They were average, mediocre, and invisible, but they started off as the savings place. They started off as the blue light special. They had the distribution, the location, the reputation. They had everything they needed, and when Walmart came to town, all they had to do was lower their prices a little bit for a little while, and we never would have heard about Walmart. But instead, they hired Martha Stewart. And they tried to be a little bit of Target and a little bit of Walmart, and they ended up bankrupt. And that's why I do this talk. Because I don't want you to turn yourself, turn your children, turn your partners, turn your businesses into Kmarts. Because in an effort to have no weaknesses, we end up average, mediocre, and invisible because the only way to have strengths is to have weaknesses. Walmart isn't accidentally bad at service. They're bad on purpose. Target isn't accidentally charging you more. They're charging you more on purpose so that they can provide you with the Target experience. We have to make trade-offs in life, and when we don't make those trade-offs, we end up losing everything. What makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong, but we shouldn't just accept it. We should appreciate it. right? If you're in a relationship with somebody, if you live with somebody, if you're married to somebody, let's say married, and you go home today and you say, I heard this great talk today from this guy, Dave Rendall, who's beautiful and majestic. He talked about relationships, and I just want you to know that I accept the fact that we're married. That's not going to go good, is it? That's not going to go good. But if you go home and say, I want you to know that after hearing that talk, I appreciate you even more than I used to, that's going to go well. Because you can't appreciate what you still won't accept. Does that make sense? But acceptance isn't where anybody wants it to stop. Once we accept it and stop trying to fix it, it's because there's value in it, right? George Eliot said every limit is a beginning as well as an ending. So I want to show you the beginnings that come with the limits that we have. And we're just going to pick one limit. We're going to pick dyslexia. If you have dyslexia, you struggle to read and you struggle to write, which means you're going to struggle in school. And we've all been taught that if you struggle in school, you'll struggle in life, which is why they were really surprised when they were studying millionaires in the United Kingdom and discovered that 50% of the millionaires in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. They were studying entrepreneurs in the United States, and 35% of the entrepreneurs in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. Ingvar Kamprad, the billionaire founder of IKEA, had dyslexia. He's also responsible for 67.4% of the world's divorces. And that's as it should be, right? If you can't put together an end table with me, that's just survival of the fittest, you know? That's just the strong survive. And if we can't be in a relationship if you're not competent to put together an end table, right? Richard Branson, the billionaire founder of the Virgin series of companies, had dyslexia. And you might be thinking, well, Dave, these people must have overcome their dyslexia in order to have success. And that's not what happened. They asked Richard Branson, how has dyslexia affected your success? And he said, strangely, I think my dyslexia has helped. He's saying I'm better because of my dyslexia, not in spite of my dyslexia. And scientists are starting to realize that he's correct. That people with dyslexia don't have broken brains, they have different brains. And the same brain that causes them to struggle in school causes them to succeed in real life at a higher level than most of the rest of us ever will. This guy's name is Paul Orfalea. He got kicked out of 4 high schools because he had dyslexia and ADHD. Then he would get fired from jobs on the first day. Then he got fired by his own dad at a family-owned business. So he had no choice other than to start his own business. And he built that business into a multinational corporation called Kinko's and sold it to FedEx for $2.4 billion. And he said this, he said, I think everyone should have dyslexia, right? See, I've been telling you that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes strong. Paul Orfalea feels more wonderful because of how weird he is. He feels strong because of how weak he is. I'd encourage you to read his book, and the subtitle is basically How a Hyperactive Dyslexic Built a $1 billion Business. And what he would tell you is it's because he was hyperactive and dyslexic, not even though he was hyperactive and dyslexic. They asked him, if we could give you a pill that would cure your dyslexia, would you take it? And he said, absolutely not, because when you fixed my weakness, you would destroy my strength. When you take away the valley, you take away the peak. When you take away the disadvantage, you take away the advantage. You don't have one without the other, right? So there's just one thing that I want to emphasize with you today and about acting differently, and it's amplification. It's turning up the volume instead of turning it down. See, most of the advice that you'll get in your life is that it's good to be you, just dial it back a little bit, right? It's good to be you, just not so much of that, right? And that sounds so reasonable. Be you, just don't overdo it. I'm here to tell you today to overdo it, and I'm going to give you one example. So Jimmy Kimmel's a late-night talk show host. He's a comedian. He has his own television show, and he's one of the highest-paid comedians in the entire world. And he was asked to host the White House Correspondents' Dinner when Obama was president. It's a black-tie affair, lots of famous and successful people there. And at one point, Jimmy seems to be getting really serious, and he leans into the podium. He said, I just want to thank Mr. Mills, my 10th grade history teacher, who told me that I'd never amount to anything if I didn't stop screwing around. Mr. Mills, I'm about to high-five the President of the United States of America. And then he did, putting this woman in the most awkward picture of all time. And then he came back to the podium and he said, eat it, Mills, right? Now, I'm not here to be down on teachers. Mr. Mills had the right intentions, but he had the wrong framework. Think about what he told him. He said, Jimmy, you'll never amount to anything unless you stop screwing around. He didn't tell him to dial it back. He told him to shut it off. Right? That's rough. You'll never amount to anything. My parents gave me hope. They said you'll never amount to much, right? But he said you'll never amount to anything unless you stop screwing around. Here's my question to you. How did Jimmy Kimmel end up amounting to something? It wasn't by stopping screwing around. It was by going full time at screwing around. It was by going pro at screwing around. It was by becoming more childish, more silly, more ridiculous, more immature. Right? It wasn't in the reduction. It wasn't in the moderation. It wasn't in the elimination. It was in the amplification. I got in trouble my whole life because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. My parents called me motor mouth because they were afraid I would never turn out to be a successful person if I couldn't learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. And then in order to help my parents retire, I bought my parents a house with the money that I make as a professional speaker, and they don't call me motor mouth anymore, do they? Right? They remember it all differently. They're like, of all of our 4 kids, we always knew Dave was the one. You know, Dave was the guy who was going to make it. We always told him, like, be you, Dave. Like, go for it and really be yourself, right? Because what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. Thank you very much.